Hey, this is Chaplain Tony Repic with the podcast called The Balance from Biddle Air National Guard Base. And I'm excited that I'm sitting down with a gentleman today that you're going to get to know pretty well over this hopefully short discussion, but you never know how long it's going to go. Someone who's extremely going to be beneficial for not just the folks here at Biddle Air National Guard Base, but for the military family at large. So one of the things with podcasts that I'm doing here called The Balance is this concept focusing on mind, body, spirit, and social. And we want to make and give tools to folks that are listening to this podcast, tools to make them healthy and whole, not just in work, not just in life, but in both, their whole life. And so that's the concept, is put these tools in that tool belt so that you have a life plan, resources that you can tap into to make your life successful. So I have Mr. Eric Hergenroeder. What do we call you? H what? What is it?
H plus 11.
H plus 11. Nice. H plus 11. He is a newly appointed AGR JAG here at the wing. We're excited to have him. We're going to get to know him a little bit today. So Eric, hey, welcome to the podcast here, The Balance. I'm glad you're taking part of this today. So tell us a little about yourself, where you're coming from, how many kids you have, just so the folks that are listening to this know who you are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Again, Major Eric Hergenroeder. I am from, where am I from? I'm from Baltimore, Maryland originally. We moved around growing up, but Maryland is home. After college, after law school, I joined JAG Corps as an active duty Air Force JAG. Did that for about 6.5 years. I did all kinds of different things all over the place. I was the chief of legal assistance, civil law, which is sort of contracts, agreements, installation issues. And then I spent a ton of time doing military justice, which is sort of military criminal law. So did that for a number of years as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney overseas. So I spent a lot of time in the Pacific, and then was actually the legal advisor to the Air Force Drug Testing Laboratory doing forensics, which was fascinating. Started having little kids, and the active duty lifestyle became a bit more of a challenge. So we decided to separate. I actually joined the DEA at that time as a civilian attorney, stayed in the IMA program for the reserves, and then started working my way in the DC area up, through the ranks at DEA. And my most recent position was the supervisor for the administrative law section, where I had about 18 staff, about 15 attorneys and 3 paralegals under me. Still have little kids. And was, the deputy staff judge advocate out in Martinsburg on the guard side. My wife and I had a long discussion, maybe about a year ago about, hey, is this sustainable for this period in our lives? Mm-hmm. And so we started looking for opportunities, and, I'd always told her that if there's an opportunity to wear the uniform full time again, I want to do that. She was extremely gracious, obliged, was willing to make the move when this opportunity came up. Nice. So it's my wonderful, beautiful, amazing wife. I have 3 children. So Ava, Max, and Reese. They are 8, 5, and 2.5. Oh,
wow.
So,
You're a busy guy right now. 8, 5, and 2.5. Remember those days. Yeah. So, what's interesting, what you mentioned, Eric, is that you were active duty. Where'd you do law school, by the way?
University of Maryland.
Maryland, so, okay, yeah. So how many years were you active?
So I was active 6.5 years. 6.5
years active. You leave active duty.
Yep.
You go to do some private work. How long were you in the private world then?
Yeah, so I was a federal employee with the DEA for about almost 5 years. So during that period, I was an IMA for 3.5, and then was a DSG, deputy staff judge advocate out in Martinsburg.
Gotcha. Nice. So one thing that's unique, and again, this is no knock on active duty in general. You bring a different perspective, though, because you come out of law school, you go active duty, now you do some other work outside the military. Yeah, you're still part-time, but you're doing different work. And so you come back to us here at the wing, at Biddle Air National Guard Base, more about the Attack Wing, and you get to share your expertise with us. And so I think what's unique about you coming on board full-time here is I came here full-time starting really in 18. And I noticed almost weekly, I was having discussions with our airmen. And they had questions that were legal questions. And we didn't have, at that time, we did have a full-time person, but they went on a tour, and we just haven't really had somebody here since about the middle of 18. So we need you here. We need you because there's so many questions that pop up. And you're not going to get in some discussion about that today. The one thing I want to say, that this is intriguing to me, right? So I'm going to start off with this. And this is a simple concept that's not easy to talk about because of the nature of it, right? This is the idea of a will. Before we deploy, I think everybody has to sit down with you, and you ensure that they have some will in place, right? But what's intrigued me recently is that a high-ranking officer told me that they don't have a will, which is interesting. And I called my mother, who just turned 70, and I said, "Hey, Mom," because I was dealing with an issue here with an airman that unfortunately had Mom and Dad pass away, and Mom and Dad didn't have a will, and they were 70. And I just happened to ask my mom, like, "Hey, Mom, what's your plan here? What do you have a will? Who's going to be your executor and all this stuff?" And she said, hey, Dwayne," she was calling my stepdad, "do we have a will?" Like, they didn't even know. They didn't have a will. It's like crazy, right? So hearing what this airman went through, and just my mom's telling me, "Oh, I'm going to be the executor. There's no will." These things are stressful. And, you're dealing with something like a loved one passing. The last thing you want to worry about is all this minutia and administrative work, right? So talk about that. Why is it important? Why should not everybody in this uniform, that wears this uniform, or in general life, why should they have to get a will?
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I mean, and I'll even share a vignette myself that as an attorney who managed legal assistance, that was my first job as a JAG, right? I had access to all the programs, all the training, all the expertise. It even took me about 10 years to do my own will. I drafted it 5 times.
Really?
But again, part of those decisions of when you sort of sign it, you say, well, this person's going to be my executor. That person I want, to do this or that. It's a challenge, right? To say who's going to be the guardian of my children, right?
Sure.
And so I totally understand sort of the hesitancy or the challenge associated with doing it. But, it is one of those things, like you say, you don't want to leave your loved ones with the challenge of trying to figure out what you wanted to have happen, right? In the event of your death.
Sure.
And, we provide an amazing service. I have an amazing team, so I'm here full time. But on drill weekends, we plus up from 1 person during the week, which is me, to 6. And so we have 2 attorneys who are brilliant and awesome. One of whom was a former chief of legal assistance at McGuire, and was like the legal assistance attorney of the year for the Air Force. So if someone, wants to talk to someone about, wills, right, or a personal family matter or a civil matter, that is a legal issue, you can set up an appointment with us to sit down for half an hour, chat with us. Nice. We can't help you on criminal law issues, and we can't help if you're trying to sue the Air Force, but anything else is fair game. If someone wants a way to go and are looking for sort of legal guidance and counsel on the front end. And so that's one of our captains. And then our other captain, she's amazing as well. She has a ton of experience, and she is, former prosecutor, former defense attorney, wonderful contract attorney right now. And she provides the exact same services too. And she is very caring and really truly wants to help people when that happens. Then we have a staff of 3 paralegals as well. So when we talk about wills, estates, and trusts, that's where sort of the rubber meets the road. Master Sergeant Tabar, our senior enlisted leader, has been doing these wills for, I think it's been 15 years, and he is like the expert at it. So he has been training our more junior paralegals, and he knows more than wills than I think I probably ever will. And so that's a service that we provide, right? So come get a will, right? During drill weekend, you can set it up. We're working on the SharePoint site where everyone can have access to those materials about how to get a will, and that should be coming along soon. But it's critical because your will, in concert with your advanced medical directive, right? Advanced medical directive telling medical providers what you want to have happen if you can't make a decision on your own behalf. In addition to healthcare powers of attorney that appoint an agent to make those decisions for you. All those things, all 3 of those things work in concert in the event of a potential end of life or end stage condition. And it really does help tell not only the authorities, so the court or any creditors that might be out there, here's the order of operations, but also really helps your family. The people that are going to be left with dealing with not just the emotional loss of you, but then the challenge of having to navigate whatever legal processes or financial issues that are out there.
Sure.
And again, the opportunity to get those things, we can do that for you. And it's something that typically on the outside, even if you got a basic will through, a website service, it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars.
It's free.
So if you're a military member or you're eligible to end it, we can provide those services for you.
You throw some words out there, and I'm only a little familiar with them just because I've been helping some folks recently, and what it means to have a medical clause built into the will and all these other things. But here's the big kicker to all this. Our folks could be educated by just sitting down and talking to you, one.
Yeah.
But I think, can you hone in on this for a second? What are the detriments of not having a will? Talk a minute about that, because I think that's the bigger portion of this is, oh man, it just sounds too daunting. And you know what it is, but it's even more daunting if you don't have a will, because there's other ramifications.
Yeah, and it sort of depends state by state where you are in terms of the challenges associated with it. But if you don't have a will, and if you have anything beyond the most basic of family structures, meaning in the sense that if, most assets, if a court has to decide, right, how they're going to dispose of your property in the event of your death, they're going to go by what's called common law, right, which goes back to merry old England and what they used over there, which we adopted in the early American days, which means that they're usually going to go by bloodline, right? So by your lineage. So say you pass away, if you had then any living spouse, right, they would go to your spouse. If your spouse has predeceased you, if you had living children, it would go to your children. If you don't have children, you don't have a spouse, it would go to your parents. And so if you have anything, if you were divorced, if you have adopted a child, if you've done anything that is outside of the normal course of those things, and you want anything else to happen with your property, right? If you want to make a specific request, you want to give something to someone, that has to be in the will. You have to have a will if you want that sort of stuff. Otherwise,
you lose control of that. Basically, in the individual state would take over, right? And
they'd take over as sort of the disposition of that stuff. So probate. So probate's different in every state, right? And so there are low levels of probate, there are higher levels of probate, there's no probate up to a certain threshold in certain states. So again, it's very state specific, and probate is the process of, if someone dies, what's called intestate, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning that they never appointed an executor or any of that sort of stuff. Your property is going to sort of, your family is going to be left with, what do we do? How do we navigate this process? Someone's going to be appointed by the court, right, to manage that process. But it's a challenge, right? And again, having a document that you can show to everyone, right, that says this is what I want to have happen with my stuff, is important. And also it's important, not just the will itself, because that talks about property typically, but when people come and talk to us, one of the things we always harp on is, okay, this is a will. There are lots of things, lots of assets that you probably have that are governed by contract law, that in the event of your death, you need to make sure that those things are lined up too in terms of naming and identifying beneficiaries. So for instance, 401ks, investments, life insurance policies, all those sorts of things, when you get your will, you should also go in and update those things as well.
Yeah, nice. And I can tell you, I deployed recently, so Sergeant Tabar helped me out. Captain Luciana, she's still a captain, right now?
Yep.
Captain Luciana, and they walked me through it. I had questions. I did. And you know what? I felt so comfortable because I asked them and they explained them to me. Mm-hmm. And some things where I'm like, I think I should do this. You can always revisit it. The bottom line is, though, and look, I'm a chaplain, so I could speak of life and death at times. We just don't know what's going to happen in life. Yep. So while we're breathing, while we still have some control, take control what you can right now. At least get the will done, right? Knock that thing out. And look, if you're listening and you're a spouse and you're like, my husband or my wife that serves never told me I had this option, get all over them on it, all right? Because Eric and his team are here. They want to help you. And if you're near an active duty base, right? Active duty base has the same services.
Yeah. So I think typically there's one caveat with that is that some active duty bases might be reticent to provide guard support. Sometimes if you're on orders for over 30 days, though, if you're doing like an MPA tour, an ADOS tour, or you have over 30 days, if you show them the orders and say, hey, I'm on orders over 30 days, they'll be able to help you out. I've had lots of folks that have been able to sort of get services if it was at a time when we couldn't provide them, whether it's McGuire or Dover or wherever you're nearby, and if you're on orders or you're about to deploy and you need something last minute, sometimes those folks can help out as you're getting out the door too.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And I'm actually glad you didn't share your contact info yet. I was going to hold you off, but don't do it. I want people to listen to this, get to the end of the podcast, and then you can share some of that contact info. But so Will, so again, everybody should have one. Let's knock it out. Again, something you put in your toolkit to give you peace of mind. Kind of direct with what the future that's unknown for you, but what your future looks like in case there's a catastrophic event. So that's good.
Yeah.
So some of the other services, I get folks come in all the time. Custody issues, issues with divorce, issues with real estate. And I know you can't handle all those things, but talk a little bit about what you can offer and help out with, and what you're able to even guide people through. Because I get those questions almost once a week, and literally as a chaplain, someone comes in with an issue.
No, and thanks for mentioning that, Tony, because that is another service we provide, right? In addition to sort of the wills and the actual testamentary documents, right? Again, you have the opportunity as a military member to sit down with an attorney if you have a personal civil legal issue, right? And you can sit down. Where I think of us, we can't represent you in court, right? Again, we can't represent you if you want to sue the Air Force or the Air National Guard, and we can't represent you in a criminal matter. But if you are interested in, and you don't know like where to go, right? This is a legal issue. I need to sit down and talk to someone who's an attorney who can point me in the right direction. Again, my staff is available to do that. Whether it's a 30-minute increment, you want to sit down and talk to them, we can set up an appointment. Usually we'll try and get some general information about what the appointment is about, so we can do the research on the front end. So that we can sit down and prepare that member and say, hey, sort of this is the general landscape of what you're looking at, and here are some recommendations as to where you can go. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and again, I think these are some challenges that our airmen just don't know. They don't know where to turn to sometimes.
Yeah.
It's so good, again, having you full time here to be able to tap into and make those phone calls. And again, you're going to save money initially, and you can help direct folks. Whether or not you can provide the service is one thing, but you can actually offer up potential resources to where they could directly get what they're looking for on the outside. Again, that saves time, that saves money, saves you headaches and everything else. And again, the will to me is huge. So transition for a second here about some personal stuff. How have you enjoyed your transition to the Pennsylvania Air National Guard?
So I've actually loved it. So one of the things when I was in DC, one of the challenges is that sort of the higher up you go, the less you get to really interact with people, right? You get to the less you feel like you're really helping people. And so I wanted to sort of get back to that. And so being able to build relationships and everyone to be so warmly welcoming, and to say, hey, what do you think? How can you help? Like, we're excited to have you here. And it really has been a really positive, warm, welcoming environment. I will say that the culture here has been fantastic. Everyone has been professional, graceful, and the folks here are top notch.
That's great. Are you a Philadelphia Eagles fan yet? Or?
I'm still a Baltimore Ravens fan. So they're not the AFC, so I feel like we're not too. Yeah. But I'm sure I will not be wearing my Ravens jersey to a Phillies game or to an Eagles game.
Yeah. No, but the wing is lucky to have you to come aboard. I'm glad you're here. I think I got back from deployment a few months ago. I think you had just started right after I came back, right? So I know we've worked together on some of this religious accommodation stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I think the one thing I like about this podcast and kind of what we're trying to do is the collaborative nature of all of our shops. They all intersect. Sometimes I've seen over my career, I started Army and I moved over to the air side, 14 years Army Guard, deployments, ADOS tours, all this stuff. And I saw lots of silos in some ways. As I came to the wing, and I don't know if this is unique to the 111th Attack Wing, but there is a collaborative nature here. And, I want to work to support each other. And I think I'm going to challenge you, if you're listening to this and you're in a different wing, collaborate with your agencies. It's not about, the chaplain show or the JAG show or the sexual assault response coordinator show or the DPH show, right? It's a collaborative effort where if we're working together to try to help solve problems, man, that's the best. That's why the environment, it could be a good environment to work in.
Yeah.
Not that there's not going to be challenges, right? People in our own lives, we have challenges. But when we collaborate, I think that's where I get excited about doing the Balance podcast.
Yeah.
Because I'm a spiritual guy, if you will, out of those four pillars: mental, physical, social, spiritual. But it kind of bleeds into everything. I mean, and kind of, that's the same thing with what you bring in your team.
That's exactly right. And I mean, to your point, that's what makes it fun, right? Like, if I were just doing legal work all day, right, in a vacuum, that's okay. I've done that, right? But when we get to interact and collaborate, and I get to learn from you all, right, from your unique, talent, skills, expertise, and your perspectives, I think that makes us not only the wing better, but then makes us better as officers or members of the 111th Attack Wing.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, hey, so I appreciate you sitting down today and at least getting this kicked off. I'm gonna ask you to share your contact info in a minute, but for those that are listening, those that maybe have some feedback even for Eric or myself about what you want to learn more about regarding some legal things, I advise you seek us out and say, hey, do another one of those podcasts, but talk about this. This is a forum that we want to use to get good information to you, again, to make you healthy and whole in those 4 areas of your life. So before we close today, I'm going to ask Eric, would you share your number or whatever you're comfortable with sharing, so
sure.
folks know how to reach you and your team and get the help they need.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so we are actually working on a SharePoint site to get all that contact information out there, as well as all the legal assistance resources. So you will see that hopefully mid-March on the SharePoint homepage under the wing side. But our extension is 7161. Again, 7161. We also have a legal office org box that you can email. And I wish I could, rattle off the string there. But if you go in the GAL and you put 111th Attack Wing, 111 ATKW, JA, that should pop up as the legal office org box. And you can always email that if you want to schedule a legal assistance appointment. And then we'll also reach back out to you with instructions about how to sort of fill out will worksheets and those sorts of things in advance, so that we can sit down with you, go through all the documents, and then execute those after meeting with an attorney.
Fantastic. What was the extension again?
7161.
7161. And our public affairs team, little plug for them. They've done such a great job building these platforms that we're going to be able to, obviously, if you might be listening to one right now, maybe it's Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, where you're going to be able to tap into the podcast and also other links that take you to our app that we have, the AF Connect app, some of the SharePoint contact information that we can only access here on base, but that's an avenue, and just other ways that we can get those resources into people's hands much easier than in the past, so that spouses can listen to this. Because I know we get so much information thrown to us, especially on a drill weekend. All these great things, but you go home and you're exhausted and you forget to communicate half of them just because, not because you don't care, because there's just so much information. So I'm hopeful that spouses are listening, family members are tuning into this, and again, we can all learn from each other, so that again we can grow in those 4 areas of our lives to make our lives whole. I want to close by saying this: the concept of a balance, right? You've probably heard this before in life. The key to life, they say, the successful life is balance, balancing that professional life, your personal life, and all these things. I think one of the reasons why we struggle so much with focusing on these 4 areas is because the way we're wired as human beings, we think if we put the same amount of effort in all 4 of those areas, that's what success is. But it's not about the amount of effort. It's just doing something in those 4 areas. I'll give you an example. You probably can't exercise for 5 hours a day. 1, it's not good for you, right? It's too much. 2, you don't have time to do it, right? And 3, you would need to spend so much money on food because you have to refuel and replenish your body. But if you do 30 minutes a day, which again, you might do more spiritual things more than 30 minutes a day, or spending time with family, connecting in a day, or looking at your, I don't know, maybe some of you like looking at finances and you're just looking at the stock market, right? The idea though is just to do something in those 4 areas consistently. That's the balanced life at the end of the day. So I wanted to stress that because I think a lot of folks I talk to, and I mentioned this life plan, kind of like a will, their eyes glaze over, they get freaked out. And it's like, this is just too much. It's not really too much. It's just doing a little bit in each area to improve your life so that you can win at work and be successful in life. And that's what this podcast is all about. So, Eric, thanks for bringing some of this to us today. Sharing. I know folks are going to take advantage of this, and I'd love to have you back on here with some other information again. Whatever we hear and collect at the wing, and whoever may want us to hit a topic, we're gonna do that and deliver for our folks. All right, so hey, thanks for tuning in again to the Balance Podcast. This is Chaplain Tony Repic, and I'm out.